Okay, so I thought I was recording for the beginning of this, but apparently I didn't. So I did a few things. I added the reference planes in, and this is, I use the MOV file, so if you have the Google Drive links, that's basically like the new updated link should be the correct one. And I've had good luck with that importing into Maya, so I threw that in, threw in some like super basic geometry. And somebody pointed out that the reference was mirrored, and it was. So I do apologize for that if that caused any confusion. Basically, what happened is when the left foot on the side was moving forward, it looked like the right foot on the front view was moving forward. So to fix that, I actually just grabbed the image plane itself, put it in a group, and then just scaled the group -1, and it'll just invert that reference. So you can do that if that's causing you trouble, and like I said, I do apologize for that. And I've also just thrown all the ground planes and stuff in a display layer because I don't want to deal with clicking them every time I try to do anything. So same thing with the geometry. That's also the only thing I really care about is the controls. So that's the only thing I've really left selectable. Apart from that, I've just started really loosely sort of blocking animation. And my basic thing that I start with is I don't do a lot of animating in the perspective view. A lot of times, it depends. So I'll use perspective view. This is a very linear animation where it's the person walking in a straight line. So it's easier to sort of work in perspective view. It also allows me to kind of conveniently match, like, does this leg layout match the layout of this? But it really depends, again, situationally on what you're animating. Most times I won't animate in perspective view. Like if I was, trying to do like a thing where a person's like running across a room and like rolling behind a couch or something like that, I would definitely not do that in perspective. Obviously this also breaks down for like diagonal walks. But basically what I've started with is I usually start by animating the root joint. And you can see I've just kind of gone through and be like, okay, like what are the major hip motions? Like for frame 1, I just kind of block in like there's a little bit of rotation on the feet. Again, you can see that the legs are not like perfectly balanced, and I'm just kind of trying to match this as best as I can, and then I'll come back usually later and kind of refine this once I get the major motions in. So when I'm doing a walk, I like to sort of start with the feet. I do a few things. I get the feet like more or less kind of done-ish. I move the leg positions, like the foot positions, and then I'll move the root. And the reason that I work on all 3 of them at once is because they all affect the length, quote-unquote, of the leg, where it's really hard to fix an animation if your people are all taking like 6-foot wide steps or something crazy. And the only way that I personally have found to really be able to like tell, am I making these steps too wide or too small, is to get the legs like, not totally final, but like, at least roughly in place. So I can see like kind of where they would sit, and then I can smooth out the rotation, or if something's like rotated weird or moving weird or timed weird, I can fix that later. But you'll see, so like this is maybe, I don't know, this is maybe like 15 minutes of animation for me, and we have like some janky little steps, and then they kind of, obviously this is where I stopped. But anywho, so I had narration for that, and apparently I just didn't press record, so I apologize for that. But I'm going to go through and just kind of go through the rest of this basically. So like I said, in this case, obviously the foot is moving forward, and you can see like here by moving the foot position, it's pretty aggressively changing like where the leg is. And this is obviously like really insane looking. I've actually gone past the end of my animation. So like if we look, I think here was more or less where I stopped. So we have the leg starting to pick up, but like this clearly, like this is way too far forward, because even with this leg bend, and having like with a bunch of torso bend and stuff, like the angle of this legs is like ridiculous. Like the person is like falling forward, super crazy. I think I might also be moving my feet out to the sides, and this is also, incidentally, one of the dangers of animating in perspective mode, and also using object things. So I should be totally in world mode here. So that was dumb. Don't recommend that. I'm actually going to go through into my hypershade, because I don't want to try to fix that. I could, but I am not going to. I would rather just delete the animation for specifically the translate Y and Z, where they go crazily. Actually, no, I don't even need to do both. I need to do Z-axis, and then I can just kill those, and then it should be straight. Cool. The beauty of the graph editor. So I am assuming, hopefully from previous animation classes, that you guys went over the graph editor. It's a really convenient way to sort of proof your animations, and this one again is like also veering violently off to the left. Oops, hello, what have I done? Oop, whoops. So I'm just going to go ahead and sort of forcibly put that straight, and that helps significantly. I still think these are a little bit maybe, actually no, that's actually pretty good. Yeah, so I mean that's one of the reasons it's good to sort of check again, like all the angles as you go, and get the sort of feet and stuff down. Whoops. And then also delete whatever the heck this random stray frame is. Now this is a good example of IK popping, where if you look, this leg is like super hyperextended, and then as soon as it gets enough slack, it like pops down really aggressively to being bent. This is really, really obvious when you actually watch an animation. It is a thing that you most definitely want to avoid. It's like my biggest pet peeve, honestly, with doing IK. So we get, yeah, there we go. We get a little bit of popping there. Definitely get some popping there because I've just done really weird, nonsensical things. So that's something where I usually just like, as long as it's not like super extreme, you're not like ripping your leg off the ground kind of thing. I can fix that IK popping later just by repositioning the hips a little bit, and that's fine. Alright, so I'm just going to go through and I'm going to save this because I don't trust Maya. And let's see here. So I'm looking at the foot closest to the camera, and we have... Cool. I think usually when I do leg stuff, I kind of look at the, a lot of times I'll look at the non-foot in the air pieces. If I have an IK switch on stuff, I'll actually switch over to FK whenever the leg is in the air. It's a little bit overkill, but I really don't like animating IK anything that's in the air. But again, it's personal preference. Alright, so then we get, again, a little bit of heel roll. You can see starting there. Lower heel roll. Foot is popping off the ground because I've, positioned this really weird. Alright, and then, so I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to work on doing, sort of finishing up this leg, getting it to at least the end of the walk itself. So we have some pretty extreme tippy toe roll here. Whoop. So I'm going to go do this, and maybe a little bit less ball roll. I said less. Rage. Alright, and then make sure to set the tippy toe back to 0. And the foot plants down, I'm going to say about on that frame. So I'm just going to be like, and that's barely in front of the first one, so I'm just going to drag that casually over there and do that. Oof. Okay, that was weird. I got like a 2-second like blip in the animation. Anyway, alright, so then I'll basically, actually, I'm going to shift this over a frame. What the heck? Alright, so that's done, and obviously I'm going to go through and very much refine that foot and ball animation, because that looks insane right now. I'm just kind of trying to get the overall foot motion so that like the steps themselves are in place. And then I have this little, goofy little thing right here where we do a little bit of ball roll in this foot. And, oh weird, my toes just like pop up there. It's kind of creepy. Alright, so in this time I can finally use the toes because it's not officially off the ground yet. And I'm just going to give that like a little bit of rotation. I have not actually been keying these, have I? That was a weird... Oh, I know I have. Yeah, I've not actually been keying these, have I? Whoops. Lump. I've just been like clicking random values. Alright, so we have... And again, you can see that this like pretty closely mirrors the animation I have. And then I'll just physically lift the foot up until it plants right here. So it's frame 85, and the foot leaves the ground on frame whatever this is. So I'm going to go ahead and just key these. And then I said frame 85. And it looks like my feet are more or less in line with the other foot. Actually, no. If you look at this reference, it's slightly farther forward. Actually, no, sorry. My reference is reversed. So I should be looking at this. So this other foot is slightly farther forward. So it's ever so slightly back. And it seems like my feet are still... oof. Oof. And it seems like my feet are still more or less sort of bent outwards. I don't know, my feet don't walk straight for some reason. Alright, and then that's my foot planted on the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and just zero this out. And that's actually not totally awful for that motion there, to be honest. Alright, so I think what I'm going to do now is go ahead and just pop back open my... where am I going? Animation editors, my graph editor. And just look at the translate Z of this, because again, this is like gone really off to the side there. In a way that it's probably damaging my animation. Alright, so let's see what we have. Oh my god, my computer is like exploding. And also remember that like this is not a good way to test the speed of your animation by scrubbing through the timeline. However, since we have basically imported our animation and are doing more or less like a one-to-one version of this, I'm not overly worried about that right now. Usually I'll look at that more in the polishing stages, in terms of like the actual, oof. Yes, this is the reference. In terms of the actual sort of things matching up super closely, and like the polishing is usually when I start doing play blasts of things. So I'm going to start going in and just adding a little bit of extra like hip rotation here and there. I think I'm also just gonna yes. I'm just gonna leave my hypershade open on my other monitor. This is stupid. So I think I'm also going to like this is clearly too low, so I'm gonna delete that and see if that helps a little bit with the character being perpetually crouching. Anywho, so I think I'm just gonna go ahead and more or less finish off the feet, honestly. Because I just think it's easier to sort of have them done. And it's also, the feet are also not horrendously dependent on another part of the body. So they're kind of just like an easy thing to just like finish and be done with, in my opinion. So I'm going to pop back into my orthographic mode. And let's see here, what do we have? Alright. So obviously I need a little bit of Y translation in this foot. And I usually just sort of pick a place sort of semi-arbitrarily in the middle. And I'm just going to like, all right, I'll set a keyframe on the translate Y. Do also make sure that you actually have other frames to bring the foot down, which in this case I don't. Cough. So make sure that like if a foot is supposed to be touching the ground, it's actually going back to touching the ground. And the reason I like having these controllers able to zero out on the ground plane is if you're not moving on like a slopey surface, you are able to just zero that out and it'll go straight back to not clipping on the ground plane. So now we have a little bit of this sort of foot motion going here. And it looks like kind of right here, we're getting a little bit of rotation on the ball of the, on the heel of the foot is what I'm going for there. So I'm going to go ahead and keyframe the heel and just kind of throw that forward a little bit. And usually I have to come through and like animate some of the other, alright, so it pretty much stays bent until about here. So I'm probably going to have to like lower the foot now because I made it like really high. And then that should pop down pretty much right here. And again, zero that out. And now, ooh, why is my foot coming apart? And now we should have some kind of little stepping motion that does a not terrible job matching the original animation. What I'm going to do is come back and add a little bit of also some toe bend in here. Because it feels like here, there's definitely like my toes are bent upwards a little bit, so I'm just going to be like, boop. You can also go a different route and just go like hella stylized with it, where the toes are just sort of floppy and they just like follow the rest of the animation. So one thing to also look at on the reference is watch, like, the heel and the ball of the foot, they touch down, and then my toes flatten out. So that flattens out like a solid, like, 2 or 3 frames after the rest of my foot. So that's a good thing to add in terms, oof, what is happening? So questionable. I clearly set something up very wrong in the rig when I did that. I'm going to ignore that for now. Also because I didn't reference the rig, so I can't really change it. Cough, cough. Alright, so I'm going to grab my Hypershade, I'm sorry, my, where am I going with this? This thing. And I'm just going to drag this down a little bit until it seems like the foot is at a better position for what I wanted. And now we have, again, you know, finished little broken foot. It also seems like I've forgotten to set a key. Someone's delivering a package. It also seems like I've forgotten to set a keyframes, like when this plant's down. I have a keyframe on my Translate X, but I never reset that. It looks like when I move the foot forward. So it's just, you can see it's just sliding forward. So what I need to do is just go through and figure out the frame where that foot starts moving, pretty much right here. And I'm just going to paste that value in. It's going to drag my foot back into place. And now we have a nice planted foot. And this is where where IK is delightful. You need to do no extra work to keep that foot planted. You just put a keyframe on the beginning of the stop and on the end of the stop, and then it just lives there until you move it, and it's great. Alright, so, and again, now we have the other foot lining up. Not super crazy looking. So I'm going to go ahead and just sort of finish that little foot area. I've more or less done... wait for it. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so we have the ball roll, and I'm going to just put a semi-haphazard keyframe in here just to kind of make the legs not hyperextend. Yay. And, alright, so we have ball roll. We get a little bit of tippy toe roll in there, which it looks like I have done, because that is clearly changing. And then I'm going to basically figure out where I want the foot to more or less flatten. So I guess it gets a little bit weird sometimes because like you have to, you know, you control the tippy toe and you control like all of these other parts of the foot. So it can be like a little bit weird to have to go through and like keyframe all of them. But basically here it looks like we have a little bit of toe roll going up. It's also rotated a little bit down at the heel. And the foot also clearly hasn't, I haven't picked it up off the ground yet, so I'm just going to go through and kind of, in a somewhat arbitrary place, be like, all right, let me translate this thing up. And this is obviously, okay, that's clearly too high. Later-ish problems. Cough, cough. I'm just going to go through and kind of like see how that looks. And it's not a bad idea, again, if you're messing with these values, just like scrub through as you go and make sure that you're not like undoing stuff that you didn't mean to undo kind of thing, because I do that like all the time and it sucks. Alright, so I'm going to do a little bit more on my heel and maybe just like squish that down a little teeny bit. Oh god, that's fun. And then it looks like at this point the heel is like really pretty much more or less flattened out, but like not quite. I definitely need to give a little bit of love at this point to the height of this foot, because it's objectively insane looking. And it's also very obviously not set back to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and just, again, make sure that's sitting on the ground. And that should be more or less this foot, honestly. Oof. Okay, so it gets a little bit like choppy weird in here. And I think, so right now we have toes, ball, tippy toes, and heel like all doing some stuff. And then I've also gone through on the heel in this case. And yeah, so we have a value of -13 to 0.7, and that is absolutely why that's popping. Crazy. I'm gonna close it again. Dang it. Okay. So I'm gonna go and find my heel. And yeah, these are obviously really insane looking values. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that and see if that smooths that out anymore. And it actually does seem to do a pretty good job of doing that. So honestly, most of the reason I use the graph editor. And sometimes I'll also, if I notice anything that's like a crazy curve, sometimes I will just go back and sort of delete things and see how it looks. It's also, apparently, I have forgotten to keyframe this, plant it on the ground again, down here. And this is where auto key is like kind of annoying because it doesn't realize like, oh, I don't want this to be moving right now. So that's kind of a pain. Sometimes you have to go back and just like do it manually, but not the end of the world. And I think what's happening here is it looks, the downside of using like the heel roll and stuff like that is that it can, oops, what am I doing? Hello. It can absolutely like make your foot clip through the floor if you use it weird. So in this case, like the heel roll was a little bit too aggressive, and it was basically causing the foot to clip through the floor. It also, I probably shouldn't have rotation on the toes like that, because it looks like probably should be planted on the ground, but we're not. So this is where the graph editor is nice, and you can just sort of come in. What have I done here? You can just sort of go in and see. Okay, these toes are like perpetually rotated, so I've definitely like messed up. Oops, shoot! I deleted the frame for the tippy toe. I was looking for toes. Hooray! Alright, so we have the toe roll, and then it died. This is when the foot like plants itself on the ground and the toes stop moving. So, and then it's just, for some reason the toes start rotating up. It's not for some reason, it's because I didn't key them. I didn't key them to stay flat before they should start moving again. So I wanted them to maybe start going upwards about here, it looks like. And I'm going to just, a few frames before that, set the toes back to 0. There we go. And then, again, once the feet flatten on the ground, you see that they sort of come to like a resting position. I'm gonna kill that toe rotation again. It also looks like, what's happening with the heel? If I set that to 0, that does nothing. Okay, oh, that's because my leg is hyperextended. That's fine. Fine for now. Alright, cool. So now we have, again, another little walk with the floppy little toe. Alright, and I've also messed up my heel here where I've not keyed it to flatten properly. So if we, again, this is pretty much where it should be flattened on the ground. We go down and just keyframe that to 0. And stays there, stays there, stays there, moves. Alright, cool. So I think that leg is pretty much done. Great. And now I'm going to save this again. I'm actually going to save a different version of this. Great. Alright. Excellent. Alright, so I'm going to do the other leg. It's honestly pretty much the exact same process as this one. So I'm just going to kind of start at the beginning and go, okay, this leg is not really moving. We have a little bit of like the heel. You can see it barely starts moving. So I'm going to go ahead and keyframe the ball of the foot. And bend that all the way up until it pretty much stops moving here. Oh, wait, I've already done that. Or did it? What? Okay. I'm going crazy. I forgot I also did like the beginning of the foot on some of these. It seems fine, so I'm just going to kind of leave it. But I do need to translate this whole foot up a tiny bit, and then again, just make sure that it stays on the ground when it should instead of like hovering really weird. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, shoot. I'm going to go ahead and keyframe that. And then it raises a little bit. Should come back down to 0 right here. I'm going to go ahead and smack that down onto the ground. Should stay at 0, should stay at 0, should stay at 0 until, whoop, right about, I think I went one frame too far, right about here, arg, where I need to key selected, and then moves forward, goes to 0, probably about oh, we can see it from the other view actually. So plant's down about there. I'm gonna go ahead and key select it again. And then if we look at the translate Y here, basically somewhere between these two frames, I'd usually just do sort of halfway between them. We need to keyframe the foot to be a little bit off the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and set another keyframe there. Auto key is going to catch that for me. And then what we can do is start refining the motion when the foot actually plants on the ground. So a lot of times I'll start with sort of, okay, like where does the... I find for me personally, like when I walk, wow, I have really weird foot position when I walk. What the heck? So a lot of times when I walk, I sort of right around the middle of my stride will sort of start flipping my foot, where I no longer want ball roll, I no longer want tippy toe roll, and that's when my heel starts kicking in. So I'll give like a tiny bit of rotation to that, just make sure that my heel is not actually doing anything down there. And then, again, by the time, it looks like I have a little bit more heel roll here, so I'm going to go ahead and just be like, boop, give it a little bit more oomph. And then it kind of starts, wow, I like really extended my leg on that step. Kind of go a little bit even more with the heel roll, and then by this frame it should be completely planted on the ground. And this looks pretty crazy because the feet keep breaking. Cough, cough. But it seems, actually, this heel roll, it seems like it's actually pointed down a little bit more, and then my toes are coming up a little bit, which is weird. And I'm trying to find, I want to raise the foot off the ground a little bit more as well. So I'm just gonna pick a frame and shift it up a little bit. And you can see my toes are also raised, so I'm gonna go through and do that as well, and just make sure that it looks like kind of around here is where the toes like low-key start breaking. And basically I'm just going to make sure that they're keyed to a raised position. This frame also seems to be a little aggressive with the heel. You notice the angle is not as aggressive there. Yeah, this is not like a terribly... I'm sure it's not terribly amusing to watch. And then again, just make sure that you have the... Right about... My computer is dying. Usually a frame or two after the foot lands, you'll have that toe... go flat again. And I'm just going to make sure that it stays popped a little bit longer. Give that a little bit more rotation this way. So it has a more sort of pronounced landing. And it also seems like I've done something very weird with my Translate X, which, yeah, if we look at, I don't know what the heck I did here, but if we look at it, for some reason it's moved really far forward, and then it like comes back, which explains why it, oop, hello, which explains why it goes really far forward and then comes really far back. So I think I'm gonna delete that frame and then see if, oh my, that's some real excessive heel bend there. Alright, so that feels like perhaps I have maybe done something crazy down here. Excellent. And it does actually look like my leg is definitely not far enough forward by this point, so I think that other value for the leg when it was farther away did actually probably make more sense. So I'm going to go through and actually just shift all of these a little bit up, and I'm holding shift so I don't move them out of place, but maybe something like this. And then you'll notice my other foot's going to be slightly out of place, so I'm going to have to move that one as well. But that's a simple matter of just grabbing this control, grabbing the Translate X, and then shifting this value up a tiny bit so that it's slightly in front of the other leg, which obviously also really messes up the hips. So I'm just going to kind of shove them along in the direction of my animation. Yeah, and I mean, that's pretty much kind of the legs. I need to do that one little itty-bitty step on the end, for this stupid little foot. And then, actually that's like pretty much, I need like a little bit of heel roll. It looks like somewhere around here I might want to start messing with. Sometimes I just put a keyframe on all of them because I'm like, I know I'll need to change these, so I just delete all of them, and you know, it's not going to make a huge difference. Alright, so I'm going to give myself a little bit of heel roll, a little bit of toe roll, and it feels also like this needs to be less super off the ground, so I'm just going to do that. See how that plants itself. I am ignoring the fact that this is like obviously glitching, if that wasn't entirely obvious. Alright, yeah, so that seems fine, and then like when this hits the ground, I'm just going to go ahead and just make sure that all of these are set back to 0. It seems like they all are, so we're pretty much good. Yeah, and that's more or less the feet. They should be pretty much good. Let's just see if I play this. It's going to be really laggy because I'm recording, but let's just see how this looks. For funsies, it's like a little bit poppy, but like reasonably not terrible. And remember that I've also not really done anything to the hips at this point. There's obviously some issues with the heights of things, and like the legs are falling apart. But this is usually where I start. I kind of get the feet more or less done, and then I can go back in and kind of fix the atrocious whatevers I've done to the hip later. And actually a lot of times when I start doing the hip, I'll put in these temporary animations, and I don't know, I find it really hard to edit temporary animations, and it's just like I end up fighting them, so I'm just gonna straight up delete all of them, because I'm crazy. And it looks like I'm basically just gonna kind of move these, so sometimes I start sort of blocking things in where it's like, alright, this, if you'll notice the hips sort of like, they get lower, like at the middle of the walk, and then they'll get and then they'll get sort of higher once you're, you know, on one leg and your other one is kind of moving forward. So I'm just going to kind of go through and like, you know, mimic that. So I'm going to do, a lot of times I'll sort of do all the low values, just kind of like get those kind of placed decently. Again, trying to do my best to sort of match the angle. Like right now both my legs are fairly extended. So I'm trying to keep both of these legs fairly extended. Again, trying to avoid IK popping, because IK popping sucks. Alright, so we do that, and then we come through to the next step, where my feet are like more or less kind of in the middle. And I usually take a little bit more liberties. I like animating feet, because I'm weird. So like for the hips, a lot of times I'll take a little bit more liberty in the sense that like I am not as precise about the keyframes and stuff like that. Alright, and maybe pull this up a little bit. We have some, you can see it's kind of like getting better, slowly. It's also usually not perfectly uniform motion when it's usually not perfectly uniform motion when, for like the speed of the hips. So a lot of times if I find personally, like if I sort of like match the angles of things and like it'll get me like a pretty good approximation of something that looks like reasonable timing for the animation as well. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and just, I'm sure that there's some horrible things that I've done. Yeah, this starts moving forward like way too soon. So I'm going to kind of say maybe like here. And again, this is like very sort of rough pass animation, not terribly fun. I'm just going to kind of like shift that back into place. Just making sure that everything, like nothing is ever really moving on like the same axis. This, for example, is, well, not really for example that, but it's weird that I was suddenly moving backwards for no reason. But again, you just get like a little bit of shift, and even though I'm not being like insanely precise about the exactly how it's moving, the fact that it is shifting in and of itself makes the animation feel a little bit more natural, because if you move one part of your body, the rest of it moves as well. So, alright, and then this is where I'm going to go through and kind of just like low-key halfway between these, but like doesn't need to be perfect. I'll usually come through and add a little bit into the sort of like height of the hips here. And then once I've done this, I'll usually go back and add a little bit of extra rotation into things. So you can see here, like we're going to get a little IK pop if we play that. So I'm going to see what happens if I sort of lower this a little bit and maybe rotate the hip slightly. And you just sort of go back and forth. And again, make sure you're not doing anything like super crazy and choppy where like this shouldn't be bobbing up and down, you know, like super crazy, but it should be like decent-ish. And then we're on one foot, so like the hip should be coming up and pretty much centering itself over the leg. And I've done something weird here, it looks like, where, I mean, for one, my hip rotation is like really aggressive. But it looks like I've done something weird where this foot should be coming farther forward, and it's not quite. So that is something I do want to go through and fix in the feet. While I'm doing that, let me... Alright, what do we have? We have translate Y. And let me just make sure this starts moving at the right spot. Yeah, so I think I'm using Maya to... What? Okay, anyway. I think this is just one of those weird instances where maybe the foot's not quite moving fast enough, so I'm going to go through and just manually, you know, push that into place so that it's timed correctly with the animation. Basically, never rely on Maya to interpolate stuff totally correctly, because usually it won't. Moral of the story, I guess. Alright, so we have this. That's not too bad. And should be kind of rotating forward a little bit. Okay, so you can see here it gets, this leg is like very aggressively popping, like right there. It's like way too extended. Also, that knee should be bent. So I don't know exactly what I did at this point. It seems like this keyframe was maybe set a little bit weird, and I just need to, instead of like pushing the legs forwardly so much, you know, push this a little bit back and then maybe a tiny bit up. Just to kind of shift that weight better. You can see now we should... Nope, we still get a little bit of IK. That is a bad IK pop. Oof. Alright, why is that happening? So I'm looking at the feet, maybe like... Is there something I can do with like the tippy toe? Pretty much as soon as we give it any tippy toe rotation. It looks like that's also a lot of tippy toe rotation, or sorry, ball rotation, happening in a single frame. So that's something where I might come back and give it just like a tiny bit. I might like nudge the tippy toe up a little, nope, wrong way, up a little bit here, and that should probably help relieve that sort of pressure, I guess, on the IK handle. So we have the feet going, great. Alright, obviously I'm not. I've stopped working on the hips at this point. Alright, so then I'm just going to kind of, at this point, kind of maybe, it looks like I'm looking at the side view mostly, is sort of closer to me. And I've also moved, I remember I moved this one forward, and clearly I did that way too much, because it's like really far forward. But it's also, I should say, it's also not a fantastic idea to only animate looking from the side view. I'm honestly mostly just doing this on the demo, but it is good to definitely check your stuff from both views as you go. So this is like, I want to say pretty decent. Again, you can see there's like a pretty considerable amount of rotation going on the hips. So like swinging pretty far-ish forward, stops, there's like a lot of up and down motion, comes back, and then it comes and swings back again and kind of straightens out. So this is usually the point where I will also go through, if I've only been in a single orthographic mode, and I'm going to come into the front view and look at this. So I've just done a lot of walks, so I kind of like know. I'm not saying I'm fantastic at animating them, but I kind of know the mechanics of a walk. So there's usually a few things I'll do at this point. One I think is going to be, that is a ridiculously aggressive rotation of the hip, which is one of those things where had I not only been animating in the side view, I would have caught that. So I'm gonna tweak that and then just make sure that that hasn't done anything horrendous to my... Oh baby. Yeah, that's done something pretty horrendous to my animation. Okay. We'll just make mouse over that view. Just come. And just make sure that doesn't, you know, break anything. All right, that's real poppy. Hello. My computer is like on fire right now. Okay, so we have a really aggressive change in rotation here, which is like clearly outside of the bounds of the normal animation I've been doing, so I'm going to kill that and see what happens. And that's actually how I smooth out a lot of my animation. I will just kind of go through the graph editor and just systematically kind of murder things. And just sort of, if a keyframe looks really out of place, sometimes I will just sort of delete that and see if that fixes the issue. Alright, so I'm just going to call that good. This wasn't supposed to be some kind of insane thing. Alright, so yeah, let's do the front view really quick. So one thing I normally do, if we look at the frontish view of my walk, one thing that I do a lot is I will move my feet sort of back and forth, where think of like a catwalk. I feel like a lot of people do that like somewhat naturally. I certainly do. So one thing that I will do is look at the translate X, basically. Wait, what? Which way is X? Yeah, so X. Oh, right, okay, I forgot I nudged that one back. Okay, so sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually come through and like anywhere where my foot is planted on the ground, I will, bad at selecting frames right now, I'll come through and I'll just shift it slightly behind my other foot. And in this case, it's not by any super insane value. It's just sort of, I'm going to go through and do that basically anywhere where I plant my foot, and anywhere where my foot picks up again. So you could also do this, you know, if you were doing both sides at once, you could just do this at the same time. That is also an entirely viable way to do things. You can also make extra controllers for like your heel ball stuff. It is kind of annoying to have them all on the same controller. So if you want to make like a floating one that just sort of follows the foot randomly, that is also a thing that can be done. Alright, and then I'm just going to go anywhere pretty much in the middle of a step, so say like right here. And if we look at this, I guess, from the front view, you see like right now the foot looks like it's basically clipping. What I can do is basically push this foot farther out, so that what it does is it kind of starts from behind, swings out, and then goes forward again. So that's just a thing that, again, I personally really like doing. I think it adds a lot of, I can't say like cuteness, because that's not the right word, but I think it adds a little bit of personality to the animation when you do that. So it is a thing, like I said, that I will oftentimes do. Let's make sure it doesn't, okay, that's probably moving a little bit fast at the end, honestly. I think what I'm gonna do is maybe just, I'm actually gonna move these down a little bit. Basically, I'm having issues because it's moving really aggressively in a short amount of time, so I'm just gonna kind of adjust that slightly. Anywho, I'm gonna do the same thing over here. So I'm gonna come over, and wherever I have keyframes on my X, which seems like frame 17. Okay, frame 18, apparently. I'm gonna go through and I'm just gonna actually, shoot. I'm gonna have to fix that. Alright, that's fine. Wait, what am I doing? Oh, right, my foot started out in a good place. I need to move them after they start moving. Okay, great. So I'm going to where I take my first step, and then I'm going to translate this. So we're getting, I mean, this is like I'm going to exaggerate a little bit for the sake of demonstration, because this is definitely more catwalky than I was doing in the reference. And then again, if we just sort of come somewhere maybe like halfway between these guys and just like move this out a little bit. Obviously, in this case, we don't want it clipping. Oh, shoot. Oh, whoops. That was dumb. I was animating it where the foot should have been planted, and that is objectively not what I want to do. So what I should be shooting for is actually moving the leg a little bit out here so that it doesn't clip. And also maybe kind of here and just be like, arg. Arg. Arg point 3! Ah! Okay. What is happening? I would like to look at only, oops, sorry, only translate X and Y. I forgot I was doing things with that in the background, sorry. So like that's sliding and it shouldn't be, because the foot is not even off the ground yet. So I think right about here is where I would actually want that foot to stay planted. That should fix the sliding issues. Great. And then wherever this thing has translate Z is getting like pretty botched as well. So I just need to basically bring that a little bit translated out to the side more. So again, we have this weird sort of little catwalk thing. It's ridiculously over-exaggerated, but I'm not overly concerned with that. Because this is supposed to be a demo, and it's apparently gone on for 45 minutes, so, you know, yay. Alright, so the other thing that I do, like, it looks kind of silly if the torso is, like, moving perfectly straight forward, and at this point it's just crooked, it's straight crooked at the end. So I'm just going to kind of, like, push that back into place so that it's maybe a little bit less goofy looking, frankly. And you can see here that it does seem to be, I'm trying to figure out which foot, because I did shoot the video backwards and comp it together backwards, so I'm sorry for that. But what I do a lot of times is I'll just sort of shift the hips back and forth a little bit. So like if you have your weight on one foot, like say here, your body would naturally shift so that the weight was like over that one leg. So that's usually what I try to recreate. And I've done that very badly here. That usually does not happen. Does that translate Z? That usually does not happen at the... It's usually where one foot is planted and the other one's in the air, not whatever I just did. So in that case, that would be more or less like, I guess, here-ish kind of thing. And again, just kind of winging this for the sake of holy crap, that scared me. Just kind of winging this for the sake of demonstration. So over here again, we have an area where the foot is sliding aggressively. I usually break my animations with crazy-looking slidey feet. And in this case, I'm looking at my graph editor, and I can see that it is because I have put in stupid values for the Z, so I should, at this point, on frame apparently 40, have no translation on that, and that should fix the slidey feet. Great. Cool. So, alright, so we're going to start off relatively balanced. We're going to shift the weight over to this leg. And don't freak out if none of your keyframes line up, like that's totally fine. That's, in my opinion, usually makes the animation actually look a little bit more natural. Cool, that's actually not terrible the way it is. This should maybe shift a little bit to like here, and I can just see from the front view that knee is bending like a whole lot. Alright, and that is my janky walk. Yay! Obviously very over-exaggerated and could be cleaned up a lot, but I'm going to go through and do a quick play blast of this, and we can just, I guess, take a look at it and see how weird it looks. So this is usually, if you're doing play blast stuff, normally you'd want to turn off your controllers, so just, you know, turn off like NURBS curves, or make a display layer for them, that works too. Make sure none of your gimbals and stuff is selected, and then do play blast. I would like the scale to be 1, and I'm not overly picky, just for testing purposes, what the resolution is. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And just again, I'll see what this looks like. I'll show you guys the animation, and then I guess in a separate video we'll do the jump, because this is getting like really long. I was not expecting to be doing this for an hour, but here we are. It's a little weird sometimes when I animate stuff. I'm like, it must be perfect. And frankly, I'd actually probably be weird about this if I wasn't recording and it wasn't making my computer explode and cry aggressively. And I probably didn't need to play blast the end of this because there's no animation here, but whatever. Live and learn, or something. Oh, perfect. Pulled it up. I don't need to find it. Alright, yeah, so I mean, here we have, like, the actual animation. If I was critiquing this, I would say... Okay. I would say, one, there's a lot of extra time at the end, which doesn't need to be there. And two, there's definitely some popping and, like, IK popping, particularly at the end on that leg. The angle of this doesn't quite match up to the reference. It's a little bit too bent. IK pop there. Why is this being so bad? Little bit of an IK pop that's going to happen on the character's right leg. Actually, no, maybe... Yeah, it's like a really small IK pop, but it's an IK pop, like right in there. But yeah, so I mean, there's some jittery stuff here and there that needs to be cleaned out. The toe bend on these legs, like when the toe is bent upwards, is perhaps a little bit over-aggressive. And by perhaps, I mean it is, and it's extremely over-aggressive. But I mean, there's the start of physics there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that this is good, because it's not. But there is, again, at least an attempt at, like, translation and rotation on this pelvis here. The legs, you know, have some secondary motion in the form of, like, toes. They're lifting at the right spot. And then any IK popping that's happening is minor enough where cleaning up the values probably of whenever I was doing that last animation on the hip, cleaning up those values should fix any of the IK popping, right? Like it's not the foot, it's not the foot a foot away from where it should be, where you would need an extra like 5 inches on the leg to make it not explode. But yeah, so I mean I don't know if that was at all helpful or if anybody has actually watched this entire thing. But if you have, hello, welcome to the end of this video. I'll do another bit about the weird sort of jumpy bit at the end. But yeah.